Kenny with Just the Right Angle, coming at you live. About to do a update on, in a few minutes, there's going to be hearings. There's scheduled to be hearings regarding the Malinowski ATF raid. For those who don't know, Brian Malinowski was murdered in March by our own government via the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, an organization that should have never existed in the first place. And in a short version of what happened was that Malinowski may have violated some laws regarding guns. What in the world? Sorry, folks, I attempted to have this on Podbean. And Podbean decided to give me some problems. Oh, I see what it's doing. So anyway, Little Rock, Arkansas is where this raid took place. And instead of raiding the drug pushers and cartels that are in Little Rock, the human traffickers that we know are in the state, they raided a guy who had no criminal record, busted into his house pre-dawn raid. He, not knowing whether if it was law enforcement or not, fired. Okay, enough. Start. And it ended up being one big mess in which a man who the punishment never really fit the crime on him, but nevertheless he was killed. At the very least, it was negligent homicide, which is the same if someone were to get drunk or high, take a gun, go out and shoot someone. In addition to his Malinowski being murdered, his wife was detained, held for several hours in a car, not allowed, given any due process. Today, there is a hearing regarding this raid. In a just world, I doubt anything much is going to happen. I think the best thing would be to do is to just be somebody handcuffing someone, walking in and handcuffing these ATF officials, whoever's going to be there. Let's see. Here it is on the Arkansas Legislature. You can see the agenda. The state police is going to be there. Frank Scott Jr., our worthless mayor, is going to be there. Eric Higgins, our worthless sheriff, is going to be there. Heath Helton of the Little Rock Police Department. So I don't think any ATF officials are even going to be at this hearing. But basically, this looks like it's going to be how much our local law enforcement coordinate on this. And by the way, there is a massive crime spree in the area of Little Rock. If you go to Little Rock Hood News or other similar places, you'll see example after example of all kinds of massive amounts of crime being committed. High-speed chases, raids, attacks on people. Yeah, the place is a nightmare. Little Rock is turning into Banging in Little Rock 2.0. And that's what's going on there. And Frank Scott Jr., when he's not over at Arthur Steakhouse and using a large part of the police department as his own security detail, for which we pay for, is trying to push a tax increase, most of the money which will go to pet projects that won't do anything regarding the crime issue. So all I'm doing now is sharing this. So let me go off camera just a little bit. Y'all can still hear me, but you just can't see me. Here, I'll just put this up. This is one of the things I thought of. Different types of murder. First degree is any premeditated, purposeful killing. Second degree is when someone kills someone planning to do so. This is a third degree felony murder during another crime. Manslaughter is supposedly no malice. It's accidental. Voluntary manslaughter. It's kind of a diminished form of first degree murder. Involuntary manslaughter. Reckless conduct or criminal negligence, like medical field, vehicular manslaughter. But these hearings are supposed to start any moment. It's supposed to be 2 minutes from now. Of course, the government agencies aren't known for being punctual, so there is a chance they could be late. If they are, well, we'll just kind of have to wait. I'll talk a little bit more about them. The Arkansas legislature is overwhelming majority Republican. However, that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that they are conservative and for fighting for freedom. And in point of fact, it seems to be the case that they are more or less letting this happen. I am sharing this with as many groups as possible. So I have my Rumble page and my Podbean up, both recording this. And I also have this on Ocean, so I could edit it later for radio broadcast. Supposed to start in 1 minute. Hearings on the ATF raid on Malinowski. Here's a little background of the ATF. In 2021, they had a budget of $1.5 billion. And even here, amidst the criticism such as the Ruby Ridge siege and the Waco siege and other incidents. Now, it was first part of the United States Department of Treasury, 1886. And then they were part of the Revenuers program during the Prohibition era, 1920. And then transferred Justice Department 1930. And were briefly part of the FBI 1933. By the way, one important aspect during this time when this unconstitutional organization was being formed, well, its brief history or its concept was being formed, Al Capone was running Chicago. And in fact, the St. Valentine's Massacre is one of the things that led to the banning of full auto machine guns, because before then you could get a Tommy gun via Sears catalog. You could order one, and actually it was very popular with ranchers, of all things. They were out there and they wanted some extra firepower, but yeah, you could get a Sears catalog, and I don't know the cost of them. As I recall, they weren't that expensive. They weren't like a car back then. It was more affordable than a car. And sorry, folks, I'm typing this. Hearings 1 p.m. Folks, if you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. You can also donate. Now, the official ATF, it says here, was formed in 1972. Okay, looks like they're about to start. Which means I'll have to, well, at least they got the page up. Yeah, here, I'll get, they should have closed captioning. There's the Arkansas State Capitol, modeled after our U.S. Capitol. You can hear some chatting in the background. And I'll try to describe a little bit what happens via Podbean. Similar to this raid, and something I like to mention, was the raid on Nathan Hughes, who was charged with in the pearl clutching incident known as January 6th, the raid on the Capitol. They used sophisticated equipment to find that they should be used to track down drug dealers and human traffickers to find out who he was based upon his gear. And supposedly he assaulted a Capitol police officer, which normally you would just get a citation for. But instead, they decided to do a raid on him at his workplace, where they pointed guns at him. And then they proceeded to go to his house and raid his house, pointed guns at his girlfriend, who was not involved in January 6th, nearly killing her. She could have easily died just like Malinowski. I believe it was a daytime raid when they attacked the house there. And then they proceeded to trash the place. This is where Liberty Safe, if you've ever heard of the incident regarding Liberty Safe, where Liberty Safe gave the FBI the codes to break into.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be just a couple of minutes late. We're waiting on a couple more members to get here. Okay. I appreciate it.
That is Arkansas Senator Gary Stubblefield, I believe is chair of this committee. You can see the names of the committee members here. It should have an agenda along the side where you can see what's going on. Yeah, Gary Stubblefield's chair. Ben Gilmore, Matt McKee. These are all Arkansas state senators. So when it goes live, oh, here we go. Here's the agenda. So there's full screen. When I'm in full screen mode, I may not be able to I misspelled Malinowski on that one post. That's okay. Folks, as I do this post, I may not be able to respond quite as quickly, so bear with me on that. I got multiple channels going in right here regarding this. Matter of fact, I'm doing a Facebook post right now. I'm actually glad they're a little bit late, because then I get to do additional shares. I need to go to here. course, if they really wanted the public input of this, they would have scheduled this after work hours, but that's the way things go. I don't know much about Mr. Malinowski. I'm pretty sure he was a Democrat. And he was an avid gun collector. He was the director for the Little Rock Airport. He was the highest paid person for Little Rock City at one time. And he seemed to have, from all I can tell, seemed to have done an okay job running the airport. Yep. Extra as an unconstitutional. Yeah, that looks like technical difficulties on their end.
Done. And I'm going to take some liberties here, sir. Is that okay?
That's okay.
What they should have done is they should have issued him an administrative citation at one of the gun shows. If he's breaking the law, treat it as the same regulatory failure that you see at gun stores when they have violations of ATF regulations. So they should have given him an administrative citation. And then they could have served him at what's known as an administrative summons, where he has to come and talk about why he's doing this. And then at that administrative summons, that hearing, they could have issued him the search warrant. But nobody in this room can say that they did things right. In fact, the ATF criminalized an activity that is commonly done at every gun show in the state of Arkansas. There are gun shows in Conway. There are gun shows in Benton. At the activity center. You know, Shane Broadway and I have been there. Maybe not at the gun shows, but we've been at other things. And that activity center has gun shows. And they criminalized that because of the volume of the guns that they alleged that he was trading, he was selling. Well, then good. Issue him a citation for failure to get a federal firearms license. Don't blow this artificially, and I would say perhaps not maliciously, but certainly they have their reasons. There was an agenda behind it. Don't create unnecessarily a huge criminal matter out of it. The state of Arkansas, and I know this from my experience here in law enforcement, the state of Arkansas has a serious gun problem. It does. City of Little Rock has a gun problem. So why in the world was the ATF expending the kind of resources on Brian Malinowski that they did? I cannot justify that under a threat risk reward analysis. Now, there are people who have said, I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to say this is why, but there are people, knowledgeable people, responsible people who have said that this was for political purposes. I'm going to let the press, the politicians,
No, it was.
speculate on that. But what I can say, under no question from anybody here or in the audience, whether or not the number of guns he may have been responsible for had any impact on crime and law enforcement in Little Rock, Pulaski County, Pine Bluff, Northwest Arkansas, no.
So what you're saying, Mr. Balding, is there was dozens of ways to deliver this search warrant to Mr. Malinowski without putting his life in jeopardy.
Absolutely. So when I was a field executive with the FBI, we talk about a pyramid. And up here at the very top is the most extreme type of law enforcement activity you can have. It is a dynamic entry. Okay. I've done those. All right. At the bottom, it's when you just send somebody a search warrant in the mail and say, hey, we'd like to schedule when we can come by and execute the search warrant. Here's a copy of it. We'll bring the official copy when we actually execute the search warrant. It's my understanding that the ATF was prepared to execute the search warrant a week ahead of time, but they chose not to because they wanted him on site. They wanted his car on site. So why didn't they execute it a week before? They had the paperwork. They had the operational plan. Was it because they wanted a high-profile perp walk for the media? No, if they had the original search warrant, they should have executed it. I don't know why they executed it at 6 a.m. I don't know why they did a knock and announce. So if you think about that triangle again with an aggressive dynamic entry, what they did was one step below. They did a knock and announce. They did it at 6 a.m. Now, what's interesting in reading all the paperwork associated with this is that nobody had a clear idea how long they waited before they went in. The agents and the task force officers are all over the map. And if it wasn't so sad, it would have been comical. So did they wait 20 seconds, 27 seconds? I think some of the folks on the Malinowski team have said it's 27 seconds. That's not long enough for 6 in the morning. Did the arrest, or not the arrest, I'm sorry, excuse me, did the search plan? They have operational plans, usually a GS-15, a field project manager, a RAC if you're DEA or ATF, it's a ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge if it's the FBI. They say 2 minutes. You will wait 2 minutes because it's 6 in the morning. People should be able to get up and put their clothes on, which is apparently a luxury, that the ATF and the Little Rock PD did not afford Brian Malinowski's widow. And that in itself is a disgrace.
Mr. Bowling, I know this is speculation again, but would you say this is political?
So I am generally an apolitical creature. I'm moderate conservative, you know. I have friends here in Arkansas who call me a rhino. I have friends who think I'm part of the deep state, you know, because I was, you know, an FBI program manager at headquarters, and then I was an inspector general out of headquarters, an IG. And the simple fact is that things frequently become political. I would simply say that if I were to make a decision, I would make my decision based on the timing of this. And the timing of this search warrant, when you look at press releases by the Department of Justice and by the current administration, there is an appearance that that could have been a motivation.
Well, with the amiss discussion about closing loopholes by this administration in previous weeks before this, it almost seemed to me, and this is speculation again, that this was to set an example. But let me ask you this. Had the ATF come to me, handed me the search warrant, and said, would you take this to Mr. Malinowski? Could I have taken it to Mr. Malinowski at the airport or anywhere else, handed him the search warrant? That way nobody's lives would be in jeopardy.
So search warrants have to be served by sworn officers.
If I had a sworn officer with me.
The sworn officer would have had to actually deliver the search warrant. So to me, I would have thought that perhaps the best solution, the one that is way down here on that pyramid, okay, that de-escalates the situation that was already unnecessarily escalated. But I would say that perhaps the best place would have been to go with one of the TSA agents at the Little Rock Airport, deliver him the search warrant, and say, hey, could you please ask? And remember, and I have some hindsight, okay? And the hindsight is that the ATF has tried to justify their dynamic entry, apparently because they were worried about the destruction of evidence. Well, if you have Mr. Malinowski at the airport, he can't destroy evidence, right? So all you do is serve him the search warrant or a copy of the search warrant. And you say, could you please ask your wife to leave the premises? And then we will leave the door unlocked so we don't have to break anything. And then we will go and execute the search warrant. I mean, how difficult would that have been?
Is it common for two different law enforcement agencies to not be wearing body cams and have them turned on?
So
when that's part of their policy?
That was one of the things that I found most troubling about the op plan, the operational plan. The operational plan, because it was a knock and announce, should have had a specific amount of time they're going to wait before they go in. The op plan planned for breach equipment. The op plan planned for a shield. The op plan put tactical members of the team on the back left and back right corners of the house. But the op plan strangely did not plan for body cameras, even though it is required by policy. Am I the only one who's confused by that?
No.
You would think, if you're doing a knock and announce search warrant at 6 a.m., you would have a specific amount of time that you wait, understanding that people may have to get dressed. And you would think that if you work for an agency that has a requirement to have body cameras on any kind of operational entry, that would be part of the operational plan. But somehow both of those elements got left off the plan. But the ATF did have breaching tools and a shield as part of the plan.
All right. Any members have a question? Senator Tucker, you're recognized.
Senator Tucker's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here and for your service.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to follow up and try to get a better understanding of what you were referencing about the ATF decision from 4 months ago. My questions are, what was it that they administratively made illegal at that time?
Okay. There is ambiguity about who is required to have what's known as an FFL, Federal Firearms License, okay? And there has been a lot of talk in network television news organizations about how they call it the gun show loophole, how that's such a horrible thing, okay? And so what they did is the ATF, understanding that the Congress, remember they're the people who make the laws, Article 2, the Congress refused to give the ATF that authority. And so the ATF took that authority and criminalized administratively the federal firearms license requirement for people who sell a certain number of firearms. Okay? Now, so when I say that before, several months before, and I don't have an actual timeline, and Senator, I will get you that timeline if you want it. I want to make sure that everything I'm saying under oath is 100% accurate.
I understand. I really care more about the substance than the timing.
Okay. So excuse me, the substance is that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms gave themselves that authority.
But they changed the requirements for who needed an FFL.
They changed the administrative requirements, yes.
Okay. And what's the administrative process through which they did that?
I don't understand that. I understand it. I don't have it before me. I don't know what the process they did was.
Nobody does.
I'm sure I can find that out and deliver that to your office, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Senator Rice, you're recognized.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Boland. This may be speculation too, because you weren't previously in charge of the ATF or even locally, but in your past, what would be your speculation on the chain of command for this type operation? Was it at a local level or was it at a DC level? Now, you've already laid out some of the things that might have been a driver on that, but who actually might have made the call on this?
So you would have a local supervisory agent, and I don't know how big the field office here is now, but I'll just go by levels. So you have a GS-14, who's usually what's known as a RAC. In the FBI, we call them squad supervisors or supervisory senior resident agent, and I've been both of those roles. And then if it's a larger organization like the ATF, I don't know how many of you know Bill Bryant. Bill Bryant was the RAC, the resident agent in charge, at a 15 level, a GS 15 level. So he wasn't senior executive service, he was a GS 15 level. So in the FBI, what would happen is the squad supervisor would develop the operational plan. And the squad supervisor would develop a piece of paper, we call it a warrant application, that would have the affidavit that was sworn to by the agent attached. And then the assistant special agent in charge, once again, GS 15 level, would approve both the operational plan and the warrant application. And then the warrant application goes to the Office of the United States Attorney. Now, generally, it's not like the Office of the United States Attorney is surprised by getting this warrant application. The United States Attorney is generally part of this investigation. So let me tell you a little bit about one of the things I was part of in the past, and that's in 2005. I had an operation called Operation Broken Loan. You can actually still find it on the FBI website. In that operation, we did multiple search warrants that I had to help with the creation of the affidavit as a supervisor, and we engaged in multiple searches, 18 searches, simultaneous, I think October 10th of 2005. That was part of a national strategy by the United States Department of Justice. And they called it the mortgage fraud takedown, or there was a lot of mortgage fraud at the time. So things like this don't happen in a vacuum. In fact, understanding what was happening politically with the decision by the ATF, and I think there was something else that was happening also. There was a Loper decision. The Loper decision overturned what was known as the Chevron decision, and the Loper decision was going to be issued sometime in June. So I wonder if the current administration was trying to get these rules in place prior to the Loper decision, maybe removing the administrative authority of the ATF to change their own rules. And once again, that's speculation.
And I believe I remember from the congressional hearings that there was an attempt to have this like a week or two previous, where this task force or these agents gathered, I think, in a parking lot, and then they found out Mr. Malinowski wasn't home.
That is correct.
He had gone on official business, I think, to DC, and had left early that day. So rather than go ahead and do it then, which they could have gone into the house then, they called it off and came back later. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
That's all I have right now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trent. Mr. Bowling, in your opinion, was the Fourth Amendment and the 14th Amendment violated here? Let me read to you what the Fourth Amendment says. The right of people to secure in their right against unreasonable searches and seizure shall not be violated. It protects Americans against arbitrary arrest. It is the basis for law concerning search warrants. That is the Fourth Amendment.
I believe that Mr. Malinowski's rights to life and liberty were violated. I don't think anybody can walk. And this was not done in a vacuum. Let's not just throw the law enforcement officers under the bus, okay? I've got a ring. It's a black ring with a blue stripe on it. I am ridiculously pro-law enforcement, okay? My heart goes out to the ATF agents who were put in this position by bad policies and bad leadership. My heart goes out to the Little Rock police officers who were put in this position because they were part of a task force. Okay? And I have been known to tell, and I have probably overseen as a supervisor or as an assistant special agent in charge over 100 operations. And every single time I would tell everybody going out on the operation, your job is to come back. Okay? If they had a wife and children, I would say, your job is to come back, especially for your wife and children. So I don't want anybody here to feel that I'm trying to throw the individual agents under the bus. But it is absolutely wrong that the ATF and the United States Department of Justice put those agents and those task force officers in that position. That was a search warrant that did not need to be a knock and announce. I'm not even sure that if Brian Malinowski had been arrested, I'm not even sure that the indictment would have gotten out of grand jury. At worst, once again, this is administrative citation. He's selling guns. He should have been cited administratively for not having a federal firearms license. And yet the ATF, for some reason, and candidly, I believe the tendrils go back to Washington, D.C., but the ATF blew this up in almost a fantastical, ridiculous manner into that he was involved in gun trafficking and that he was arming drug gangs. And that's just ludicrous. So yes, Brian Malinowski's Fourth Amendment rights were violated. Were they violated by the individual officers? I pray not. I was not there. I did not do the investigation. I've done 2 shooting investigations. As an inspector with the FBI, I did 2 shooting investigations. And as an ASAC, I had a shooting up in Jonesboro, near Jonesboro. There's a child porn issue. So I've been there. And I know that shooting investigations are hard. Tell you what, when I read the Arkansas State Police, and no disrespect to anybody in the Arkansas State Police, when I read that shooting investigation report, I was disappointed. I expected more. So I would say, quite simply, that a combination of errors, bad judgment, bad decisions, and political decisions that come from Washington, D.C. combined violated Brian Malinowski's Fourth Amendment rights to life. Sir.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to question the witness, as I'm not a member of the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Bowling, thank you for your candor and your courage to come here and speak to us. I have some, I think, simple but maybe tough questions. I want to start with, are you an attorney? I know many FBI agents are. Are you an attorney?
No, sir, I'm an engineer.
Okay. Well, I know there's accountants and attorneys, a lot of them in there, but you're familiar with the Bill of Rights,
I am.
first 10 amendments to the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that the Bill of Rights exists to protect the people from the government, not the government from the people?
I think if you read Federalist Papers, that is clearly the case.
Okay. So we put these things in the Constitution, and you mentioned the Federalist Papers, which was sort of the campaign plan to get the Constitution ratified. And it was not as simple as we look back.
Diggs.
People that pay attention to it know it was not easy to get all the 13 states to ratify.
Diggs, by the way, Seven, feel free to
Constitution,
share this with anybody else via Twitch.
There were concerns of too much power in the central government, and the proposed Bill of Rights was sort of the answer and hopefully solution to that concern. Would you agree?
I would agree that it was one of the concerns. I think specifically the 10th Amendment, though. So the 10th Amendment reserved powers to the state that are not explicitly given to the federal government in the United States Constitution. I think we forget the 10th Amendment.
I would agree with that, sir. And that's those of us in state government bump up against that all the time. The Second Amendment, which we haven't quite mentioned here today yet, guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And after some thing. Is that along that line? Would you agree with that statement?
I would simply state that that is settled law.
Yes, sir. So
It is
that the
settled
Second Amendment
law.
is an individual right to the individual people. Okay. You brought up the Loper Bright decision, and I already had made a note about that before you brought it up. But basically, if I understood that correctly, it said that while Congress can change the laws, that agencies can't. And there had been an implication under Chevron that opened I would call it the Chevron loophole that basically would, in many cases, let agencies, if it was a gray area, agencies could do whatever they pleased. But you mentioned that you observed that there was perhaps a feeling in Washington that what ultimately became the Loper Bright decision to overturn Chevron was pending, and that this could have been a contributory factor to this incident that happened in Little Rock and resulted in the death of Mr. Malinowski. Did I hear you say that correctly? Did I interpret that correctly?
As a person who's worked in Washington, D.C. 4 times, and I was on the staff of Director Mueller. I worked out of the director's office 2002 through 2004. You get a feel for these things. You get understanding for these things. And if you understood or heard any of the arguments before the Supreme Court, before the Loper Bright decision, you could see the direction that 5 or 6 of the justices were going. Okay? So for anybody to say, oh, we didn't know that Loper was going to be announced in June, or that it would be something negative for the federal agencies, that's just silly. People knew this was coming. Now, do I think that the ATF did something premeditated knowing that Loper was coming? I don't know. You know, I would like to see Jim Jordan maybe subpoena some of those emails. But the simple fact is that it's unquestionable that prior to the Loper decision, the ATF did something that in retrospect is clearly contravenous to the spirit of the Loper decision.
Which was what?
Which was they gave themselves increased administrative authority by changing the requirements for a federal firearms license.
Without going to Congress?
Without going to Congress, yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, and I'll be quick here, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence. The final thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the 10th Amendment, and of course, we in the General Assembly, we deal with this all the time. And I recognize our limited authority in trying to do anything about this, but we have passed legislation, Mr. Chairman, I think you were involved in some of it, about putting some limits on what local authorities would be forced to do if it came to abrogating citizens' rights under the Bill of Rights, as far as cooperating with federal agencies that appeared to be violating those rights. So I'm concerned, and Colonel Hager is going to be a witness. I'm going to be able to ask him about some of these issues. But are you concerned when state actors or local actors facilitate something that it ends up being a tragedy in this case, but maybe even if it didn't rise to that, to be somewhat abusive of citizens' rights? Is that a concern for you?
So it's a concern. Let me answer that in 3 ways. Okay, and I'm going to play games, and I'm not an attorney, so it's going to be tough dancing without being an attorney. As the supervisory resident agent up in Macomb County, Michigan, I had 2 task forces that reported to me. County Macomb Enforcement Team, it was a HIDA task force, and MACE, Macomb Area Computer Enforcement. I benefited greatly, and our law enforcement mission benefited greatly from the relationship between the federal, state, and local partners. That was invaluable It is not in the best interests of law enforcement, either on a national level or state level, to just take that away without a judicious evaluation of all of the facts. Okay? So I firmly believe in task forces. When I was the assistant special agent in charge here in Little Rock, I had the joint terrorism task force that reported to me. We had a cybercrime task force. We had all of these task forces, and we benefited from the relationships with the Little Rock Police Department, with the Arkansas State Police. Once again, that reinforced in my mind the value of the very important federal, state, and local relationships. Okay.
And I presume in that you're speaking of in effect going after criminals and not ordinary citizens.
Absolutely.
Doing it right.
Absolutely. Now, where it becomes apparent that this relationship is now being abused by the federal partners, then there needs to be, once again, that judicious evaluation of all of the facts.
I hope that's what we're doing here.
And I would say this is part of that process.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Bowling, thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Mr. Bowles, I just have one question, and we'll go to Representative Matt Duffield, Representative Duffield. Did the Arkansas law enforcement have to participate in the raid when there was a lot of questionable allegations and vague and insufficient evidence? Did they have to participate with the feds in this raid?
So this is where you have to make tough decisions as a law enforcement officer. And if you don't want to make tough decisions, don't go into law enforcement. Okay? Just don't. And this is where two things should have happened. One is the local and state agencies should assign people who are mature and knowledgeable to these task forces. And they should know from their bosses, from the precinct, it was, Cleve Barfield was the CID, had when I was the ASAC here in Little Rock. And I hope Cleve told every one of his detectives, ASP detectives, that if something happens that you're uncomfortable with, you need to let me know so that I can call Mark and say, hey, let's not do it this way. So if there was silence, remember the maxim of the law is silence gives consent. If there was silence on behalf of the Little Rock PD or North Little Rock Police Department detectives who were assigned to this task force, then maybe they didn't exercise the discretion that they should have, and maybe their bosses didn't give them the ability to exercise that discretion. But somewhere along the line, if you are a federal law enforcement officer, can I have another water, please, bud? If you are a federal law enforcement officer, then guess what? Or not a federal law, but you're a federal task force officer acting as a federal law enforcement officer, then you have to exercise discretion. And you should raise your hand and say, maybe this isn't such a great idea because we carry guns and those guns can do harm to people. Thank you. And when those guns can do harm to people, we need to be assiduous about the protection of their Fourth Amendment right to life. That answer your question?
All right. Representative Duffield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bowling, for your courage to come forward here today. I would like to go back to something that Senator Rice mentioned earlier. And just to clarify, everything was in place to go and execute this search warrant a week before this happened. Is that correct?
That is correct. And when I was reviewing all of the documents, the operational plan, which I'm very critical of, all the way to the Arkansas State Police shooting report. And when I reviewed all of this, okay? What stunned me the most is like, are you kidding me? That they delayed the execution of the search warrant a week just because they wanted Brian Malinowski at the house. And you want to tell me they were not intentionally escalating this? That just boggles my imagination. What is the justification? Is the justification to preserve evidence? Well, if he's not there, he can't destroy evidence. You have him exactly where you want him. Well, maybe we wanted to do an adversarial interrogation, which I've done. I've done a lot of interrogations, okay? I did interrogations in Baghdad. Thank you very much. All right?
Mr. Bowling, just to clarify for everyone in attendance here and everybody listening, can you go through which agencies were involved?
I may miss some. I will do my best to recall all of them. I do know that Little Rock Police Department provided on-site traffic control. I believe there were Little Rock Police Department detectives on this task force. I believe that North Little Rock Police Department had detectives on the task force. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. In 2011, 2012, 2013, I ran the torch run with the chief of the North Little Rock Police Department, okay? And then, of course, the ATF were part of it. I don't know if there were any other federal agencies that were part of this.
Yes, sir. So when the ATF comes to town to do something like this and they enlist the help of state police and local agencies, is there anything that prevents any of these agencies from saying, no, we're not going to participate with this. We don't feel comfortable?
No, there is not.
Thank you.
That's the point. The point when I was answering one of the previous questions, sir, and I'm not trying to be irresponsible in my response, but the whole point was, if we're going to give people guns and we're going to assign them to a task force, their supervisors sure as heck better make sure they have the ability to say, I do not want to participate in a law enforcement activity that is either ineffective or does not promote good, the best practices of good law enforcement. Did I answer your question, sir?
Thank you, Representative Duffield. Senator Clark, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bowling, for being here. A knock and announce, is that the correct name for the warrant?
That's what you would call it. But even calling this a knock and announce, I think, unfortunately, stretches the definition of knock and announce. This appeared to be a knock and announce with a premeditated dynamic entry, which is clearly for a crime that was just recently criminalized by an administrative decision that could have been addressed through an administrative citation. That is an excessive means of executing a search warrant.
Well, I appreciate that explanation. I don't think it clears it up completely for me.
I'm sorry, sir.
No, it's not. I think it's just a longer answer because I'm not at all familiar with a knock and announce. I had thought it was no knock. And interestingly, I talked to several law enforcement friends and law enforcement people who I trust and asked how they felt about no-knock warrants. Every single one of them referred to, without knowing that we had anything coming up here and me not mentioning it, referred to the Malinowski shooting as a bad case of a no-knock warrant. So it's not a no-knock warrant, it's a knock and announce. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out is, in your experience, what is normally the reason for serving a search warrant an hour before daylight with what I count 13 agents that I know of with a plan to breach the door? What kind of circumstances normally brings up that type of warrant?
The circumstances that bring up that type of warrant generally involve things like drugs and you know you have a violent gang. So we had an investigation, and I'm not even to do some of the stuff here in Little Rock. We had a great investigation in Michigan, Devil's Disciples. Okay, they're an affiliate of the Hells Angels, very active in Eastern Michigan. We did at 6 a.m. knock and announce. Okay, we did it because we knew these people were very bad individuals. All right, that is when it is justified. So we can either try the process of elimination, or we can say this is when it's justified, and if it's not that, then all the rest is unjustified.
Right.
That is when it is justified. I do not believe that administrative criminalization of the federal firearms license statute justifies this type of entry.
I don't think so either. And the consequences certainly seem like at some point this is going to happen. If you wake me up an hour before daylight and breach my door, I think I'm going to come out shooting. I think lots of Arkansans are. But at the very foundation of this, I'm bothered, because it appears to me in what I've read of the investigation that they wanted him to be guilty. I mean, investigation, you're going in, coming to conclusions. Sometimes you watch them on law enforcement TV shows, and we're just trying to eliminate you. And so some things, as you investigate, should eliminate. Some things should lead you to other conclusions. But I'm looking just here at an excerpt from one of the officers. We learned that Malinowski was some sort of high-stakes poker player. Okay? There was a lot of weird financial stuff. We didn't know if he had a drug habit. Now, how long had they been investigating him?
I do not know when they opened the investigation.
But they've been tracking his car for how long?
They were using intrusive. They were using intrusive
They were-
electronic surveillance techniques against somebody who
They were tracking his car.
failed to get a firearms license.
They were
Yes.
tracking his car. They were tailing him, and they say day of the shooting or day after, we didn't know if he had a drug habit. I guess they don't know if I have a drug habit either. We still don't know if it's money laundering. I guess they don't know if I'm money laundering either. But so I'm trying to even find the justification for a warrant at all.
Once again, when I just started describing this, and I said that this was not just a failed search warrant execution, this was a failed investigation. This was failed predication for an investigation, because it could have been fundamentally political. So this whole series of activities is dubious. And because of a dubious series of activities, a man who is arguably, and I would say the vast preponderance of the evidence, he's arguably innocent of any crime other than being woken up and defending his property, is now dead. And he's dead because there was a case that was opened that never should have been opened. And using that opened case, a search warrant was predicated to the Office of the United States Attorney. And the Office of the United States Attorney failed to exercise prosecutorial discretion. And then there were, I believe, misrepresentations made to the judge. I'm not going to call out any federal magistrates. I respect them. I respect their office. But perhaps this is a warrant that never should have been signed. And if you look at all of the volume of information in many of the documents, one thing that is missing is what we call the element of the crime. You have to meet the elements of the crime. And in almost universally through this. Other than him not having a federal firearms license, everything else is aspersions. Well, we didn't know he didn't have it. Well, you don't know that. I mean, I was, federal agent for 21 years, and nobody here knows that I didn't have a drug problem, right? I'm a good Southern Baptist. I don't gamble, but nobody here knows that I don't gamble. So for the fact that that was part of the investigative logic shows the poverty, the absolute intellectual poverty of this investigation.
Thank you. You brought that up very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tucker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to get back in the queue. I'm just curious, are you testifying in your capacity as just a former FBI agent who with experience in executing search warrants?
I'm testifying because I was asked by a friend to testify, and I respect that man tremendously.
Okay.
I'm testifying because he said, Mark, you have experience that is relevant to this.
Right.
He said, Mark, you have understanding that is relevant to this. And I'm testifying because I believe in the truth.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm testifying because I believe law enforcement should do better. I'm testifying because I have high expectations of federal law enforcement officers.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate all that. I'm just trying to understand because we're an hour into the meeting, and I didn't know if you had a direct role in any part of this or if you're working with any related party. But just we're asking a lot of questions, which is all fair and good. But we're an hour into the agenda, and we haven't even gotten to the folks who have a direct role in this. And I was just trying to clarify for my own understanding.
No, you're good. It's a valid question. I hope I answered it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tucker. Representative Long, this will be the last question for Mr. Bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bowling, you mentioned earlier that the ATF had justified using the knock and announce type of entry because they were afraid of destruction of evidence. I was wondering if you could tell me, how could a suspect destroy firearms evidence in a few minutes' time?
It's my understanding that they were concerned, and I don't have first. So this is hearsay for me, but it's my understanding. And I want that to be clear to the committee. It's my understanding that they were concerned that he may have had evidence on his computer that he might otherwise delete. Now, if that's the predication, then why didn't they execute the search warrant a week before? So you have the ATF apparently talking out both sides of their mouth. Well, we had to do a dynamic entry to preserve evidence, but we didn't do the arrest or the search warrant when he was away from home when we originally planned to do it. Am I the only person that seems a little bit disingenuous to? So if the predication for using a knock and announce at 6 a.m. is preservation of evidence, then what? I just don't get it. And anyway, I was one of the first CART team members, computer analysis response team members in the FBI back in 1995. You can recover deleted evidence. Let's not be silly.
Do you know if any evidence was found on his computer?
I do not know. I'm not privy to the investigation.
Thank you, sir.
Any other? No, Mr. Bowling, we appreciate you coming today and testifying. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So they're going to have another witness up.
Colonel Hager, if you and whoever's with you would come to the front.
So I've posted the law that they were referring to is SB 298 of the Arkansas 93rd General Assembly. If you type in state sovereignty under Keep Arkansas Legal, you'll see a few videos took of that. Basically what happened is at midnight on April 28th, they sabotaged this bill to keep it and watered it down. Asa Hutchinson did that.
Mike's on and pull them up too
Okay,
close.
I got another person up here.
My name is Mike Hager. I'm Secretary, Department of Public Safety and Director of State Police.
Hugh Finkelstein, Chief of Staff of the Department of Public Safety.
I'm Stacy Rhodes. I'm a major and I oversee the Criminal Investigation Division.
All right, thank you. Now, if you would stand up and hold your right hand up and repeat after me. I state your name.
Mike Hager.
Do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I'm about to give
that the testimony I'm about to give
will be the truth, the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help you God.
So help me God.
All right, thank you. You may be seated. All right, Colonel Hager, what role did the state police play in this raid?
I was notified on the morning of March 19th by Chief Helton of Little Rock PD.
That's the first you heard of it.
Yes, sir, that's correct. He contacted me that morning and said that there had been an officer-involved shooting involving ATF at a residence in Little Rock. And he further stated that the person involved, the subject of the investigation, was not a city employee, but he had connections to the city of Little Rock, worked closely with the city of Little Rock, and he asked if we would conduct the investigation just for the fear of it looking like there was any conflict of interest on the behalf of the city of Little Rock. So we agreed to that, and I contacted Lieutenant Colonel Jason Aaron and Major Stacy Rhodes, and we sent our investigators to the scene.
All right, was that entire investigation file turned over to the prosecutor's office?
Yes, sir, it was.
Have you reviewed the files since testifying?
I have reviewed the case summary, and I've been briefed by Major Rhodes.
All right, in the state police file, Sergeant Ryan Jacks writes, the case is complete and ready to be submitted to the Pulaski County Prosecutor's Office for review. Did you instruct Sergeant Ryan Jack's assessment?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Did I what?
Did you instruct him to say that?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. Do you believe the file submitted to the Pulaski County Prosecutor's Office was thorough and complete investigation of the matter?
Yes, sir, according to the brief I've been given, I do.
In the course of regular responsibilities of the state police, is it normal for your law enforcement officers to conduct felony investigations?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. You have detectives to conduct those investigations, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Do your detectives have offices from which they conduct these investigations?
Yes, sir, they do.
Is it common for your detectives to interview witnesses and suspects?
Yes, sir.
Is it common to interview those witnesses and suspects in the detective's office?
Yes, sir.
So you have rooms that are designated for those interviews?
We do.
Are those rooms typically equipped with a video and audio recording device to record the interviews of the felony investigation?
I believe that's correct. I would defer to Major Rhodes on specifics on that, but yes, sir, I believe that's correct.
Is there any reason to treat an investigation of a law enforcement officer any different than from a standard felony investigation?
Yes, sir, I would defer to Major Rhodes to answer that.
So repeat the question, please.
Is there any reason to treat an investigation of a law enforcement officer any different from a standard felony investigation?
Not from a standard felony investigation. There's no reason to treat an officer different. An
All right.
officer-involved shooting is not a standard investigation.
All right, where are the video recordings of the interviews of the suspects and witnesses in the shooting death of Brian Malinowski?
I'll answer that. There are no videos of suspects. There were no identified suspects. For the purposes of our officer-involved shooting, we don't label either Mr. Malinowski or the officers as suspects. They're listed as a subject or they're listed as law enforcement officers. We don't make that determination of who's victims and who's suspects in an officer-involved shooting, and that's how they differ from a normal investigation. A normal felony investigation, you would have a victim, say of a theft or a sexual assault, and then you would have a suspect. These are not handled that way.
You know why the cars that pulled up were told to hit their sirens for 1.5 seconds, which nobody heard. Even the neighbors testified they didn't hear it. And yet when they hit those, the dash cam recorder and the audio automatically come on. They had left the window down, and yet the cars were pointed away from the house. The dash cams were pointed away from the actual scene. Why was that?
I can't formulate an opinion as to what they did or didn't do. I can just tell you what they did do.
All right. When your detectives conduct a homicide investigation, does your office train them to interrupt suspects to provide justifications for their actions?
Interrupt suspects?
Yes.
That can happen on occasion, yes, sir.
All right. When it comes to important pieces of information related to a homicide during the interview, are your detectives supposed to ask the questions or provide the answers?
Typically, we're to ask the questions.
You're aware there is a video of the ATF entry team approaching the home that was captured on the home Ring doorbell
I am
camera.
aware.
You're
Yep.
familiar with that?
Yes,
Have you
sir.
seen that video?
Yes, sir, I have.
In that video, ATF is seen placing tape over the doorbell camera in order to disable the video feature of it. Are you aware that your detectives interviewed 8 ATF agents, 2 task force officers, and 3 Little Rock police officers?
Yes, sir, I'm aware.
Are you aware that in all the interviews, your detectives never once asked a question about the entry team placing a tape over that camera?
I'm aware that ATF Agent Bass gave the answer for that, so there was no need to ask anyone else, in our opinion.
Well, the only time it was brought up was when Agent Bass, in an interview, volunteered that they had talked about it beforehand and wanted to cover it up because he said something could go wrong. What could possibly go wrong?
You would have to ask Agent Bass. I don't know that. I just know that he told us it was for tactical and officer safety.
Well, your detective did not follow up Mr. Bass's statement with a single question. Instead, Arkansas State Police Agent Travis May responded, "Yeah, just to conceal y'all approach and tactical movement to the residence." ATF agent responded, "Yeah, in case anything."
So if you listen to the actual audio recording of that, that was a question posed by Travis May. That wasn't a statement because Agent Bass responds with yeah, as meaning an affirmative.
Well, then
So
why
that was
is
a
May,
question.
why is Agent May testifying in the interview of an ATF?
He wasn't testifying. He was asking a clarifying question.
Why was he interrupting the witness who was speaking on critical aspects of the investigation?
So if you listen to the audio in its entirety, he was doing what is considered a cognitive interview. So the first 20 minutes of that interview, it is an uninterrupted, and only at the end when Travis May is asking clarifying questions, he's asking so that he has an understanding in his mind of what transpired.
Do you know that the Arkansas State Police Agent May's summary of his interview with ATF? Agent Bass, Agent May recounts the statement about placing the tape over the Ring doorbell camera, but leaves out why Adam Bass said they covered it up in case something goes wrong. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Considering that something went catastrophically wrong, that the ATF agent was shot in the foot and Brian Malinowski lost his life, why was this information left out of the interview summary?
The interview summary is not a verbatim account, and we begin every report with an interview that's the case. Not everything is a verbatim of the entire interview. We also know that everything in there is going to be reviewed by the prosecutor's office.
How many residents of that area did you interview?
So we did not conduct interviews, but we did canvass, and there was nobody that had any information to provide.
What do you mean canvas?
So that's when we go door to door to ask them if they saw or heard anything. And those in the remote area are right there on that. It was a cul-de-sac. There was no one in that area that could provide any information. Therefore, no interviews were conducted.
What about the wife?
We did conduct an interview of the wife. Yes, sir.
Do you know if neighbors were home on a Tuesday morning at 6:02 a.m.?
I believe that there were a few home, but none that admitted to seeing or hearing the incident.
Was there any video of a neighbor's video camera
Not on the
of the incident?
Not on the cul-de-sac, no, sir.
So none of your investigators ever talked to the neighbor to authenticate the video?
What video are you referring to?
The one on the neighbor's house.
Oh, the one that was, okay, so that, I'm sorry, I got confused. So that video that was obtained from the Ring doorbell was not on that cul-de-sac, it was on the adjacent street. So we didn't see a reason to authenticate because it really added no, I guess, validity to the investigation.
So you never talked to anyone independent who possibly could have corroborated or disputed the statements made by law enforcement officers?
We didn't find anyone else who had witnessed it.
Why didn't Arkansas State Police analyze the legality of ATF's forced entry into a home a mere seconds after knocking?
Senator, unfortunately, I'm envious that Mr. Bowling has the opportunity to express opinion and kind of opine on his perception of this entire incident. Unfortunately, with us, it's very focused. With our agency's involvement, the investigation was very focused, and that was simply to conduct a criminal investigation into the shooting, not the investigation that led up to the search warrant or any of that. It was simply the shooting itself. So our agents, all the information was provided to the prosecuting attorney's office regarding the search warrant that was reviewed by a federal prosecutor, signed by a federal judge, and executed. So when the team members made entry, they received fire, they returned fire. All that information was documented and it was provided to the prosecutor's office. There's no place in our investigation to offer our opinion of any of the tactics that are involved. That's simply the state police's role in this incident was to simply document the facts of the actual shooting itself, to process the crime scene, and to turn all of that evidence over to the prosecutor's office, who would make a charging decision.
Do you know how much time elapsed during the time of the first knock of the storm door
Yes, sir, we do.
until agents first started forcibly breaking down the other doors?
Yes, sir.
How much was it?
I believe 27 seconds.
27 seconds.
Yes, sir.
And then the ATF began to knock the doors down.
Yes, sir.
27 seconds is not very long when you wake somebody up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
No, sir.
Word extingent means emergency. So was there emergency circumstances surrounding the execution of this search warrant?
Sir, I don't think
Was this an emergency?
yeah, I don't think the ATF would have to answer that question. We provided that timeline to the
Would you
prosecutor's office.
speculate, would you say it was an emergency to get this search warrant in the hands of Mr. Malinowski at 6 o'clock in the morning
Yes, sir.
when they could
Honestly,
have done it a week earlier?
Right. I'm sorry, but I'm not in a position where I can speculate. As you know, this is under active investigation with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. It's also actively being pursued in civil court. And all we can do is answer questions on the criminal investigation that state police did, but I can't speculate or give my opinion.
All right, Mrs. Malinowski was detained in a Little Rock police vehicle for several hours, 4 or 5, from what I've been told. Put in the back seat with just her nightgown on. After her husband was fatally shot right in front of her, just inches away from her. Was Arkansas State Police responsible for this detention?
No, not initially, we were not.
What do you mean by that?
So when we arrived, we didn't know that she was in the back of the patrol car. We were under the impression that she had been taken to a substation, or we would have obviously, and that was probably one of the things that that if we did have a misstep, that was it in our handling of her. We did not communicate well. And when we found out that she was in her night clothes, we immediately interviewed her right there on site and then allowed her to go to a neighbor's house and also got her clothes.
And Ms. Malinowski asked if she could go to the restroom. True?
I don't have that information, but I know
And they denied that.
I can't testify to any of that. I can only tell you once we recognized what was happening at the scene, we took care of getting her interviewed so that she could go and, get some clothes. And
Well, after reading the report, she was taken to a local fire station and paraded in front of firemen with her night clothes on and a blanket around her to use the restroom.
we had no involvement in that. But
Okay.
that is unfortunate, and we do owe her an apology for that.
Mr. Representative Duffield, is that your light? Representative Duffield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Few questions primarily for Captain Hager. Colonel, apologies. Does the state police organization, do you guys currently receive money from the ATF?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
Okay. You've been in law enforcement a long time. How many years?
29.
29 years. In your 29 years, have you seen a search warrant executed in a manner such as this where tape would be placed to cover up a Ring doorbell camera in the execution of a search warrant for someone with no criminal history?
This is a new, Ring doorbells did not exist. So this goes back to my age. When I was working in the field and during my time on our tactical team, we did not have Ring doorbells. I can tell you that there were times that there was counter surveillance equipment or surveillance equipment that was employed that we would try to limit the ability of a suspect to see our movements moving up. But as far as specifically a Ring doorbell being taped over, no, sir, I'm not.
In executing search warrants, would you have executed this search warrant in this manner?
Again, please understand, I probably have a lot of the same questions and maybe even a lot of the same opinions of this committee. Unfortunately, I'm not testifying as Mike. I'm testifying in our role as a department head for the state police. And I don't think it would be fair for me to offer that opinion or the speculation.
Yes, sir. When I myself look at this as a legislator and look at the state police, and we work with you guys on a number of things. And I think since your time, I think you've done a really good job in your role. And so my concern in this is essentially a black eye that has been placed on the state police. And so I guess my question is, in hindsight, what was accomplished positively for the state police being involved with this?
Well, we don't choose our investigations. In this situation, we were requested to come and handle the investigation because of the potential conflict with Little Rock Police Department. Our agents investigated this officer-involved shooting just like they have more than 20 this year alone. And the role of their investigation is simply that, to compile the information and present that to the prosecuting attorney for a charging decision. Just this year, we've had officers that were criminally charged as a result of the criminal investigation that was done by our agents. But having said that, again, it is not our role Even though sometimes we would like to, it is not our role to offer an opinion. It's not our role in this situation to judge their tactics. The only thing that our agents could look at was that there was a lawful search warrant signed by a federal prosecutor and a federal judge. They were there lawfully. They were working within the parameters of that warrant, although some of that may be questionable as far as the amount of time that was given before they breached the door. But once again, all of that information, our agents went to great detail to outline the time down to the second of when they arrived, when they announced themselves, when they breached the door. We do believe all that information is significant. And they documented down to the second all of that information and presented that to the prosecutor. But once that information is presented, we are not in a position to offer an opinion or a recommendation. We simply compile the information and present it to the prosecutor. I do believe that there will be a great deal of oversight into not only this investigation, the warrant, how it was served, but that is not the role of the state police as it pertains to this investigation. And honestly, I don't consider it a black eye. I think our investigators did a great job. They did a thorough investigation. They presented it to the prosecutor. Again, we, on a personal level, we likely have some of the same questions about things that this committee does. But unfortunately, that is not our role. I say unfortunately, it's just not our role. It's not our role to speculate about why they did what they did, and it's not our role to make a recommendation to the prosecutor. We just compile the information and present it.
Mr. Chair, one more question.
All right, you're right.
We can't change what's happened, and Mr. Malinowski is no longer with us due to what happened. In the future, if the ATF comes to the state of Arkansas again, and they attempt to, in my view, impose their will on the citizens of this state, will the state police at least consider saying no and standing up against the ATF?
So we frequently are requested by our federal, city, county, all of our law enforcement partners to assist in certain capacities. We actively tell our agents, our troopers that are assigned specifically to task force, we do not have anyone assigned to ATF, but we do exactly what Mr. Bowling referred to in that we tell them, if you're ever put in a position where you find that either the tactical decisions being made are unethical, they're immoral, they're illegal, or they're unsafe, they absolutely have the authority to stand down. And we encourage that daily. As far as this investigation is concerned, we were simply asked to perform the investigation into the shooting. I don't know that we could have done anything differently on this one. Thank you for the question, sir.
Senator McKee. Senator Hester. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all the work that you do on a daily basis. We take for granted to a great extent the work that you do every day, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate you.
Thanks, sir.
Just for some clarification, when you speak about the investigation that you were asked to complete, and you say it was to investigate the shooting, I guess I'm curious, did that investigation look at the ATF agents who were involved in the raid, or did it just look at the circumstances? I'm trying to understand what we mean by investigation. What was the scope of that investigation?
Right. So in this investigation specifically, and I don't want to speak for Major Rose or her investigators, she's forgotten more about investigations than I will ever know. But in this specifically, they are looking at, were they there lawfully? Doesn't matter our opinion of the investigation, but were they there lawfully? And they were working within the parameters of a warrant that had been signed by a federal judge. They were there lawfully and they were working within those parameters. Again, some of the questions that you guys have about the time frame on between the knock and the breach, or the announcement and the breach, we wanted to make sure that that information was available. Yeah. That's why Major Rose investigators went to great detail down to the second to include that information and make sure it was presented not only to a prosecutor, but for future reference, as the investigation unfolds now with the Department of Justice, we know that that's going to be a very critical component. And that's the reason that that information was included.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your answer. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I think you understand why the people that we represent are concerned by events like
course.
this in Arkansas.
Sure.
Who is charged with protecting the rights of the people in Arkansas? It's not only the police, it's the legislative branch, it's the judicial branch, but we're all responsible. And after the fact, I mean, these events don't happen a lot, we hope,
Sure.
but we don't want to ever see them happen, right? It's unacceptable to whoever it happens to. And I think that you understand that, and I appreciate that. But moving forward, I always hope that our officers are being educated on those constitutional principles and the rights that not only us, but they as officers have. We want them coming home every night to their families. But we also want to make sure that the people we represent that are just average, ordinary people, whether they run an airport or they're picking up your trash in the morning or whatever they're doing, and they're exercising their constitutional rights, they shouldn't have anything to fear, especially from the government. And so that's why the people that we represent are concerned by this. And so I hope that you'll take those things, I know that you will take those things very seriously moving forward. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator McKee. Senator Rice, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, you made a point that you knew the amount of time, 27 seconds. But yet I had testimony read to me from individuals that one of them said he wasn't for sure, could have been 20 seconds. One of them said, I think there was varying information. Do you agree with that? Have you listened or read to the testimony from the
Yes,
individual
sir.
officers that were there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Limited. I know that there was a question mark about how much time that elapsed between when they knocked and announced versus when they actually breached the door. I can say, being in that situation in the past personally, it seems like forever. I've executed search warrants where we had trouble getting in a door that was barricaded, for instance. And if you ask me after the fact, I may have told you it took us 3 or 4 minutes to get in the door when it actually only took 30 seconds because of a variety of reasons, just adrenaline that's flowing, things like that. So I can't say that I'm necessarily surprised that there was discrepancy between the amount of time that they thought that they were at the door after they knocked and announced versus the time that they breached. But we felt comfortable as a result of the investigation based on the audio and the video of that time frame. I think Major Rhodes' team felt very comfortable and very certain that it was 27 seconds.
Would you agree that Brian Malinowski was not charged or convicted with any crime?
Yes, sir.
And I think retired Agent Boland did a good job of describing, and I think being very fair to both sides. But are you familiar that with all the speculation in the press and the quotes that the press has used has led the life insurance company that owes the widow, Mayor Malinowski, I feel, payment on his policy, that they are, at least for now, refusing to pay a life insurance policy because of the accusations of criminal activity?
No, sir, I was not aware of that.
You're not aware of that?
No, sir.
I hope the public understands. Speculation can be very damaging, and I feel like, and I'll go back to Mr. Boland again, because he just said what I've tried to stay involved in, knowing as much about this as I can. And I hope anytime your agency partners with any federal agency, that all of your members know that they have the right that was described. When they know it's not right, they back out.
I can assure you they do know
When you put a piece
that.
of tape on a doorbell camera to start off with, when you know somebody in the back part of the house may not hear you, and you've got everything there to breach it, it's known what you're there for. And again, y'all didn't do this, and I'm thankful y'all didn't do it. We've got a serious problem because it's been done and a life is lost, and a widow has got to live with this the rest of her life, and the family too. But people, it could be anyone sitting in this room. There was no justification for this type activity. This man was not charged or convicted of anything. And it shouldn't be put up with. And I want to know, are your officers unduly influenced by federal dollars in addition to the pay that they get from the state police for being on a task force?
No, sir, they are not.
Do they get extra federal dollars?
I believe we have some federal overtime that is available to our troopers that are assigned to task force. I don't know specifically. I can't speak to the specifics of that.
Colonel, and you know I respect you greatly, really do. If you don't know that, you need to know that.
I do know that they receive federal overtime, but I can tell you.
And excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, sir, but I can tell you that they receive federal overtime because they are assigned to a task force, just like our troopers receive state overtime for working overtime. But that in no way, in no how would influence their decision to do something that they perceive to be immoral, illegal, unethical, or unsafe. And we are abundantly clear with anyone assigned to a task force. Mr. Bowling said that very, very well. And that hasn't changed from the time of Major Barfield when he was running the Criminal Investigations Division. That's been the same from then until now under Major Rhodes. That's made very clear to our task force officers.
And that wouldn't surprise me for your agency to make that very clear and to do a good job of it. But I have concern when not all agencies are maybe under the same training that you have. Would you be surprised if some make maybe up to $20,000 extra a year from being on a task force?
No, sir, I would not be surprised.
You know, so you've got sometimes county or city that are making extra dollars of that magnitude, and you don't think the federal guidelines or the federal say-so weighs any heavier than what they should realize their duty is?
I would hope not. And
I
if
would
we
hope
ever
not,
saw
too.
any evidence of that with state police personnel, they would be removed immediately.
And I do not mean to disparage law enforcement in any way, because I think this legislature has shown
You
we want
have.
to support our law enforcement. But this is one of the most egregious things I think I've ever seen, maybe because it's right here in Arkansas. But it really bothers me. And again, we've got a widow going to live with this the rest of her life. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rice. Senator Clark, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have several questions, so if you need to break in and put me back in the queue, just let me know. Colonel, appreciate you being here. We don't know each other. We've met, but I hear good things. And offline, if you would, I need your number because I was going to get hold of you back in June, and I somehow couldn't and didn't. And you had an officer out Western Arkansas at Ozark Truck Stop. It'll give some idea who it is because I can't find his name right now, that I was going to call you and commend you because he was a lifesaver to me that night. I didn't know I was a state senator. He just, whoever was there, he would have helped.
Right.
And I just wanted to let you know because we get too many complaints and not enough of the
Well,
good.
just real quick on that, if you'll allow me, for any of the members in attendance, I have a state cell phone that is completely unreliable. I've been told that many times. I have a personal cell phone that my wife and son use, and I always answer that phone. So if
you'll get me a number.
Yes, sir.
And that
I'll
can
do
be
that.
Appreciate it. From what I have observed, I don't know this to be the case, but from what I've observed, and I observe it too often, the state police are very serious about body cams and dash cams. Would I be incorrect in that observation?
Dash cams. We do not use body cams.
Okay. So dash cams,
Yes,
which
sir.
accomplishes the same thing. Y'all take
Yes,
that
sir.
very seriously, that there's a record
Right.
of interaction. That being the case, I actually don't have a problem with them covering up the whatever kind of camera we're on the house. It's confusing because I read the officer's statements. We expected he'd come to the door. We had never thought we'd have a shootout with this guy, blah, blah, blah. But if there's a chance you're going to have a shootout with somebody, you may not be able to get back to the porch to cover the camera. And so they can be inside and have observation. So I get it, but it just doesn't, the statements and the actions, as Senator Rice said, don't equal each other. I suspect, because I've talked to a lot of law enforcement officers about this, and they've all had the same opinion. And so I suspect that you and I privately have a lot of the same opinions. But that being the case, that y'all take these cameras so seriously, are you not perturbed that we don't have a record on camera of what happened?
You know, again, it's safe to say I have a personal opinion of a lot of the things that were, since, you know, you have to understand our agents didn't know at the time some of the information that we know sitting here today. But all they can do is just take the information that they have, document it, and present it.
Dodge.
And I'm not talking about the investigation yet. I'm talking about you as the head of the agency. And I have a little bit different view of things than you. You have a job to do. I have a job to do.
Sure.
And I'm sitting here as a senator, but what sometimes we forget, and I don't think you've forgotten this, but sometimes we forget, is it's not Senator Clark. It's 90,000 people that have the same questions I have, that have the same concerns that I have. And where would they look to except our top law enforcement for answers to those questions? It is certainly perturbing to them and to me. And so when I talk to these law enforcement officers, that's part of, what is your opinion? And of course, privately is different from publicly, but we'd really like to know. And we'd really like to know because we have what appears to be an innocent Arkansan dead, and shot by law enforcement of all things. And we see all kinds of things after of officer-involved shootings that it'd be hard to Monday morning quarterback, and a lot of times that the officer's just completely right, and you would pray that you are never put in such a situation. But this is not that situation. I mean, for the officers that are inside the house, they're being shot at, get it. But why are they there? Because you come to my house an hour before daylight. Now, some people are up at that point. I'm not. But you come at some point where you're planning on me being asleep. And officers who do these type things have trained and trained and trained because they know how unclear things can get. But I'm just a citizen who's fast asleep, who just woke up, and it's me and my wife. And if it were just me, if there's a way to run, I might run. But we all get this. But it's not just me, so I ain't running. And so a big part of us have a firearm close. I don't know of anything I've done wrong. I don't know that I'm under investigation. What would you expect from me? Even maybe more than a criminal who might expect the police to bust their door down. What would you expect from me? But to come out defending myself.
I can't disagree with anything you've said. And again, that's a question that ATF is going to have to answer for.
Not just ATF.
And I read here the officer's, this excerpt from the officer's statements. We thought this would be an easy search warrant. He'd cooperate and everything. It was supposed to be easy. Same officer, I figured he'd come to the door. Another officer, I never would have fathomed that this guy would have fired at law enforcement. Same officer, we normally go after violent, armed, career criminals, drug dealers. Same officer again, Malinowski is the last person I would have imagined that we would have been in an armed confrontation with. But yet, that's the case. I don't understand why we're there at 6 a.m, ready to breach the door. And according to them, they all thought there was 20 seconds or so between 3 knocks. And like you said, I can understand what, because I think you've been patient. I think if I'm there ready to breach the door, I'm nervous and impatient because that decision's been made in planning. So I'm thankful that it's not Arkansas law enforcement. I've been known to criticize the judiciary once in a while. But one of the interesting things in talking to law enforcement officers and head law enforcement officers is they told me, gold star for our judges in our county would never allow us to do the search warrant under these circumstances. And I say, well, thank God for our judges then. And thank God for our law enforcement that know better. But again, I'm going to come back to the question. Would you be surprised if somebody busted my door down that I come out with a gun?
No, sir.
Okay. I think that'll do it for now. Thank you, Colonel, so much. Thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clark. Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Colonel Hager and Major, thank you for coming. My question is actually for Mr. Finkelstein.
Thank you.
You're not off the hook yet, Colonel, but I do need to ask you some. Hugh, you're an attorney. You're, by all my accounts, a very good one. And I'm grateful you're serving the people of Arkansas. I want to ask you some things about how we do things, and maybe it would lead to how things could have maybe been done a little better in this case. Does Arkansas Constitution have a thing called grand juries?
Yes, sir, they do.
We don't hear about that much anymore. What would be necessary for this to be considered, and I'm going to call it a deep dive, by a grand jury made up of citizens where evidence could be presented to see what was going on? What would that require to happen?
Well, the prosecuting attorney's office has the ability to either call a grand jury into session or make a decision and file cases through information, which is just a written charging document. So ultimately, the decision would rest with the prosecuting attorney to determine whether or not a case should be sent to the grand jury or make that decision independent by themselves.
So because this happened in Pulaski County, it would be the sole discretion of the Pulaski County prosecuting attorney of whether or not there could be a grand jury investigation of this particular incident.
That would be Will Jones's decision, yes, sir.
So that the attorney general or no other either prosecutorial or judicial authority could cause that to happen. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, sir.
Okay. That was what I feared. I was hoping you'd tell me I was wrong when I thought that, but I think you told me what I tend to have read in the Constitution. Mr. Chairman, I've never seen anything in my life that cried out for a grand jury investigation like this incident, and I have said so privately and in a public place, but to Mr. Jones, and I would reiterate that now. I think that there needs to be a grand jury look at this. This is too horrible. We have too many citizens around the state, including a couple that I've talked to in the last week when I'm out knocking doors in my district, and some of your neighbors, Colonel. Colonel is my constituent as well, that say, how in the heck did this happen? And I would respond it exactly like Mr. Malinowski did. So I will leave it at that. I know we can't twist arms of prosecutors, but maybe I can let the prosecutor coordinator's office know of our dismay in certain things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator McGee.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. A couple more.
Yes, sir.
Were violations of ATF policy or civil rights violations part of the scope of your investigation?
No, sir, they were not.
That was kind of what I got from everything else you've said. So if an ATF agent, whether it's a supervisor or one of the guys busting down the door, breaks a law or ATF policy, who would you say is in the best position or statutorily responsible for prosecution or disciplinary action of that individual?
If he breaks the law, the prosecuting attorney's office. If he breaks a policy, it would be the Bureau of ATF or the Department of Justice oversight.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Gilmore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize because I know I've missed some of this, but I was driving up from South Arkansas, and that's quite the drive, and certainly believe in following the speed limit. So I didn't quite expect that much of a chuckle. No, and again, I don't mean to make a joke in a serious setting like this, because this does give us all pause, and it's very concerning when we see something like this happen. And I admit, I don't know all the facts. I wasn't there. I wasn't party to, what brought about a search warrant and all those things. But nonetheless, it gives great pause and concerns me. I guess there's been a lot of conversation here today about the role of state police in this. And so I guess my question, and if it's been asked, I apologize. I may have missed it, but I'm going to ask maybe directly. Federal law enforcement does a lot of things in the state of Arkansas, I presume, some of which maybe state police is involved in, many of which state police is not involved in. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So in this particular instance, state police was not engaged in this until after the fact, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Had state police been involved in this, is it safe to say that you would probably have advised or at least done things a lot differently?
We would have almost certainly been briefed by the task force officer assigned, and we would have, yes, sir, we would have become more involved in that decision process. As far as again,
and
the
I
ATF
understand that's a
doesn't
hard
work for
question,
us, right? But
hard question for you to answer,
right,
given the circumstances and after the fact,
right.
But I think it's safe to say, knowing you guys and understanding state police and the role that they have and who they are, you would probably have cautioned about doing things maybe a little bit more appropriate given the setting and how to exercise this particular search warrant.
Yes, sir. From a state police standpoint, and from a former position that I held within the state police SWAT team, we always worked each warrant, whether it be a search warrant, arrest warrant, backwards. And we would look at it from the day of or the day after. And we lost either a trooper, we had a trooper injured, or we were put in the situation of harming or taking the life of a suspect. And we would simply look at that and say, what do we know right now that would have mitigated that circumstance? And that's what we did years ago when I was a team leader on SWAT. That's what our team continues to do today. So if knowing what we know right now, before that warrant was executed, had we had personnel involved, I feel comfortable in saying that we would have, they probably would not have been involved in the execution of the warrant. But again, the ATF does not report to us.
No, and I understand. Follow, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. And I recognize that. And I understand the difficult question that is for you to answer given the circumstances you're in now. I think it is good to hear, though, from my standpoint, it makes me feel a little bit better knowing that state police maybe isn't going to act like the ATF in this particular instance. So I guess it is safe to say that your goal in law enforcement when planning something like this out is to always mitigate risk.
That's correct.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do need to add one thing on that, though. We've read, and I'm sure you have all read, the affidavit that led to the judge signing the search warrant. But what we are not privy to is all of the information the ATF knew when they decided on this method of executing that warrant. I have no way of knowing what led to that decision for the ops plan and for the supervisor to sign off on it. I'm not privy to that information. I can only testify to when I was in that role, the information that we had, we would make those decisions accordingly. So I do not know what led up to their decision to execute the warrant the way they did. They may be able to testify on it at some point when this is all said and done, and they go through their process internally. They may be able to articulate that. We are not privy to that information.
Yeah, and I feel confident saying we'll probably never know. We'll probably never have access to all that
No,
information.
you'll never be given justice.
Which again concerns me, considering that this could be any number of people, and I don't want to sit here and say that he was a perfect man. We are all flawed. We all make mistakes, but certainly what happened, I don't think was warranted in this case. And I'm thankful that state police was not involved until after the fact. But it is also comforting to know that maybe state police wouldn't act in such a, aggressive manner. And that gives me pause that we have an entity like the ATF that perhaps does act that way. So thank you.
Senator Clark, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colonel, I would agree with you that we don't know other than what was in the affidavit. And that's why I said we believe an innocent man. And I very much believe that with the information that I have. And no one's offered anything else. But I also, though, the statements that I read a while ago, and what I believe was their interviews with the state police, and these are just part of their statement, but we thought this would be an easy search warrant. He'd cooperate and everything. It was supposed to be easy. Those don't add up with having some information that would justify what we saw.
Exactly.
I won't go and read the rest of them. But y'all were put in a tough place from the time that you were asked to investigate this. But you took the job, just like we took the job. I have a problem with the conclusion that y'all came to. Your job, as I often tell people about myself, is to call balls and strikes. A lot of times people like me 90% of the time, but then when I don't call things the way they want me to call in a certain case. I said, my job's called balls and strikes, not to be somebody's friend, not to say this is right and this is wrong. And I don't know all of your investigation, but let me tell you why I have a problem, because I think it's a fair criticism. Doesn't mean you're wrong, but I think it's a fair criticism. What I get from that conclusion is that tomorrow morning, law enforcement can break into my house and shoot me, because from what I know, I'm just as suspicious as he is. And it's going to be justifiable. And that's why I and others, not because you're wrong, you very well may be right, but the conclusion I get is tomorrow, the next day, law enforcement can break into somebody's house. And here's where, not knowing all the facts that y'all know, where I have a problem. It was reckless. And reckless is manslaughter. Yep. That's where and I'm sure you've talked to your attorneys, and since I've been here, I've been in meetings with multiple attorneys, and when they say you got 5 attorneys, you got 5 different opinions, that you may have 10 different opinions with 5 different attorneys. But excuse me, Clark, for saying that, but it's true. So what can you say to make me feel better about the fact that your conclusion doesn't say that law enforcement can knock my door down tomorrow and shoot me because they're the last people I expect to be there?
Right. Well, Senator, we do not a conclusion in the investigative report, Major Rhodes could probably speak better to what goes into that. But again, our job in this case was just to compile the information and give to the prosecuting attorney. It's not our job to again, give a recommendation or an opinion. At the end of the day, the agents there, regardless of what any of our opinions are, they did have a search warrant that had very specific parameters, and they were working within those parameters. Whether we agree with it or not, they were. And within those parameters of that search warrant, unfortunately, they executed the warrant and this happened. We went to great detail to document everything that occurred there down to the timeline of the knock and announce versus the breach. But at the end of the day, that is not up to us to decide. It's not for us to give an opinion or to make a conclusion on whether or not we charge. It's simply our job to give that to the prosecuting attorney and let him make that decision.
Well, thank you. I hope we make enough noise here that this, and I know this is pie in the sky, but it's not, but it's reality, that this never happens again. Because this didn't happen in a vacuum. I've got to where I can't watch TV news anymore, but back when I was watching TV news, I was watching high political figures in this country that we knew there was no chance that they were going to be violent in any way. And we did this same thing. And this bothers me. This is America. And this bothers me that we even consider it in such a case. We want you to be able, with hardened criminals, to do the things that you have to do. But if we can't recognize the difference, then we have to put some restraint. I'm talking to Congress. I'm talking to everybody. This can't. Maybe it can happen in Pennsylvania. Maybe it can happen in Delaware. But this can't ever happen in Arkansas again. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Rice, you're recognized.
Colonel, or the other ones there, are federal employees subject to Arkansas law?
Yes, sir, they are.
And you don't think there's any law was broken in this case?
No, so that would be my opinion. And again, all we can do is just compile the evidence and give it to the prosecutor. He ultimately is the one that makes that decision.
And I'll reiterate again to what's been said here. And I don't know, Mr. Jones. One person is between justice, doing what's right, and turning their back on this. Because I don't think you're going to see the federal government do anything about it. This is, and Mr. Bolin said it very well, this is an administrative decision on enforcing policy, not law. He may not have said that just exactly that way, but it's been stated. For anybody that's unclear, it's not a law that Mr. Malinowski had to have a dealer's license to sell guns.
So the warrant was unwarranted.
There's other people probably selling more guns than he is right now. He was just a figurehead that somebody decided to take down. And what I don't want is anybody in Arkansas law enforcement to give any room for that type activity. It happens places, bad things happen places, but let's all do what we can to stop it in Arkansas. This world's going crazy. This government is going crazy from what I was taught was right and wrong, and I still believe I know what's right and wrong. And what happened here is totally wrong. But again, I appreciate you. I appreciate your integrity. And I hope you do everything you can to make sure our state police and other law enforcement are not put in this type of an action again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Rice. Colonel Hager, do you believe that Arkansas State Police should be privy to federal law enforcement activities in the state, sort of to act as a check to ensure the safety of Arkansas? Should you not be privy to that information whenever they come into the state?
As a matter of
Safety.
practicality, I don't know how we would go about doing that. They, of course, they're enforcing federal law that sometimes mirrors state law, but I don't know as a matter of practical application how we would do that.
Well, there's a session coming up. We may figure something out,
Okay.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Hager, I was wondering if you could tell us what Little Rock PD's participation was in the raid.
My understanding is they were providing marked units just for a visible presence of it being a law enforcement operation. But beyond that, no, sir, I could not.
So you don't think they were involved in the actual breach in entering the house during the
My
raid?
understanding is that they were not. Major Roads may have a better idea of that than I do, but I don't believe so.
My recollection is that they were on perimeter.
So basically, they were there just to assist.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with Act 1012 of 2021? Basically, it was passed in the 93rd General Assembly that says that state and local law enforcement wouldn't help participate in any federal government enforcement of laws, rules,
it's gone longer than I thought it would.
presidential edicts, whatever, that took place after January 1st, 2021.
Hours. Well, I'm glad of this.
Yes, sir. I'm vaguely familiar with that.
Does it look like to y'all that North Little Rock and ATF both may have broken this law?
Sir, honestly, I'm not
with
familiar enough with their involvement to give an opinion on that.
Okay, I appreciate you if y'all kind of look into that.
Yes, sir.
It looks kind of obvious to me. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions. I appreciate y'all being here, Colonel Hager,
Yes, sir.
and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Senator.
You're excused. Next, we have head of the Chief of Police of Little Rock, Mr. Heath Helton.
Oh, goody. This is a guy who I know led
Helton, if you'll identify yourself for the record.
out during some raids. I'm going to look his video up. I forgot he was going to be here. Let me take a little bit of a break and look up that video.
Heath Hilton, Mr. Chair, Chief of Little Rock Police Department.
All right, if you will stand and raise your right hand,
Let me go offline for a little bit.
state your name again.
Heath Hilton.
What do we do with it? Should have it memorized by now. All right, Mr. Hill, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. You may be seated. Mr. Hilton, can you tell us what role that the Little Rock Police Department played in this raid?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I had a conversation with the Little Rock City Attorney prior to coming here for this hearing. And due to ongoing litigation and active investigation, I will not be making any comments in reference to Little Rock Police Department's participation.
Okay, any members got any questions? Senator Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Helton. Are you familiar with how many people that are on the Little Rock PD that are involved in any federal task force?
Again, sir, just as my previous statement, in conversation with the city attorney.
I'm not talking about a specific case. I'm asking you how many of your officers are involved with federal task force. I didn't say ATF, anybody else.
Sir, with all due respect, trust me, I respect the committee. I respect every person in this room. But unfortunately, I've provided my statement at the opening.
Are you familiar that officers make up to $20,000 or possibly more per year than their salary for working on task force?
Again, sir, due to potential litigation, ongoing investigation, I'm not making any comment.
Sir, I'm saying that you're not doing a public service. I'm not asking about a specific case. I'm asking you in general for what your
your office and your policy is.
Our stance is no different than the echo of the sentiments that Colonel Hager stated earlier.
Okay, but you cannot give any statements about what your agency does in the way.
Again, sir, I have been instructed to convey what I have conveyed.
And this is the reason that the public does not trust some agencies. And again, I'm not slandering law enforcement. I'm saying this is exactly what's the matter in our country right now. We can't get answers. You ought to at least be able to give a level without going into a specific case. But you're not going to do it, are you?
Sir, I provided my statement at the beginning.
Well, let me just tell you, when you took an oath of service, I think you just broke it.
City attorney here?
No, sir, he's not.
You do realize all your records are FOIable?
Yes, sir. I understand.
So all this will come out sooner or later?
Yes, sir. For what questions you all may have at Little Rock PD's participation. Yes, sir. I'm aware of that.
Okay. Can you explain your body cameras policy?
All due respect, Mr. Chairman, I provided a statement in the beginning.
Mr. Hilton, that has nothing to do with this case. Do your officers wear body cameras? And what's your policy?
The Little Rock Police Department does have body cams. Yes, sir.
And the policy for those cameras is what?
Again, sir, I've provided a statement in the beginning.
You're making this worse. You know what?
I completely understand, sir.
Representative Duffield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've heard your statement that you will not comment anything about the LRPD today. Is that correct?
If it's in reference to what the hearing's about, I've been instructed to not make any comments due to pending litigation and ongoing investigation.
Okay. What about your discussions with Mayor Scott in regards to this incident? Would you be willing to address some questions in regards to your discussion with the mayor, who I do not believe is in attendance today?
No, the mayor's not here. I think he made it known that he had another engagement prior to this being scheduled.
Okay, I was not aware of that. Do you know when the mayor's office first learned that the ATF was investigating Brian Malinowski?
I have no knowledge of that, sir.
Okay, no knowledge of that. Okay, that's all we're going to get.
Mr. Hilton, you do know, our country's in a mess. We're in a mess. We've allowed 50,000 known, not counting the gotaways, murders, convicted murders into this country that's come across our border. 50,000. We've lost contact with 300,000 children who are either have been human trafficked or dead. And then we have millions of felons that have come across our border into this country right now. And you're not willing to answer a few of these questions to help?
Sir, I completely understand what you said. Don't disagree with what you said. But unfortunately, I've been instructed to.
Do you understand why the American people and the people of Arkansas do not trust the justice system anymore? Because of the weaponization. Because of the weaponization of the justice system and the politicalization of the justice system, we have become a third world country, a dictatorship, basically. And it's because of, we're going to FOI your records and find out. But
yes, sir.
This does not help the Little Rock Police Department, your statements here today. And I know what
sir.
you were instructed to do by your attorney. But the people of this country are tired. They're fed up. They're tired. They're tired of the unquestionable allegations and the vague, insufficient evidence that was used in this particular case. to kill a man and to put his wife in a car for 4 hours. And when she asked how her husband's doing, they failed to tell her that his brains were scattered and his skull fragments were all over the wall in the house. Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm somewhat frustrated as you are of the city attorney instructing the chief not to respond, which is not surprising to me because I've known the city attorney for, gosh, almost 50 years. But I respect the chief, and there's a hierarchy he's dealing with. But I also think perhaps, and I'm not a member of the committee, and I don't want to speak out of turn, and you call me down if I am, Mr. Chairman, but as part of the General Assembly, I think perhaps we need to look at the options that the General Assembly has to compel testimony. Municipal corporations are subject to jurisdiction of the state. As a matter of fact, they have a charter from the state, and then this General Assembly, by vote with a sign by the governor, could revoke a charter of a municipality. So we expect them to follow the law. And I would ask, again, as a non-member of the committee, but as a senator, that you speak with our counsel, and I know Ms. Garrity is in the room, but see what options that we would have to compel the testimony that would allow your committee and all of us in the General Assembly to complete our job of getting to the bottom of this. So that's all I just wanted to say, is just more of a comment and a bit of advice to the chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to say that.
Senator Clark, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The ATF had some nonsense about, although their policy was that they use body cameras, that somehow they hadn't got theirs yet. Does the Little Rock Police Department have their body cameras?
Our agency has body cameras.
Good, we got an answer. Were the officers there that day? Did they have body cameras?
That, again, I'll stand to my previous statement that I made, sir. I know it's frustrating, but
I could say, no, I'm not frustrated at all. I'm playing chess. And your city attorney put you in a really bad position. So you can't tell us either why Mrs. Malinowski, in her night clothes, woken up by all of this, was put in the back of a Little Rock police car by a Little Rock police officer for 5 hours?
again, sir,
In the 32-degree weather?
I'm not going to make any comments pending litigation and an ongoing investigation.
That's okay. That's all right. Now, does the city attorney just run the police department, or does he run the mayor's office too?
Again, sir, I'm not going to make any comments related to pending litigation and investigation ongoing.
Because I would like to see us subpoena the mayor and the city attorney. Because surely the mayor can speak. Surely the city attorney doesn't tell him what to do. You would think the voters do. And I think the voters want to know. Could you get with the city attorney and get us a date? Because we're not going to forget this.
I understand, sir.
I assure you, we are not going to forget this. I want a date when you can talk. Can you get that for us?
I'm sure if this committee makes a recommendation to the appropriate channels in City Hall, I'm sure they'll make something available.
I think you can be sure we will. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Clark. Let me remind the audience. There can be no clapping in here. That's just a rule of committee. Mr. Chairman, let me ask you another question. You take an oath. Did you take an oath when you got sworn in?
Yes, sir.
You took an oath. Is that oath that you took more important to you than what some lawyers tell you say?
Sir, the oath that I took not only represents my ability to serve this police department, which I've proudly done for almost 29 years, and I've served my country as well. So the oath means extremely important. That flag that sits behind you means extremely important to me. But I also have instructions that I've told and been told to, we're not going to provide a comment at this time.
Would you agree that just because we make a law, that law is not always just?
Potentially.
Huh?
I said yes, sir, potentially.
Should we obey laws that are not just?
Sir, I understand where you're trying to take me, but again, I've made my statement as far as comments this time related to this, and I'm going to stand with what I've been told.
All right, Senator Clark, you're recognized. Tucker, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a short comment that, Chief Helton, we put a lot on him and his time in that table that is unfair to him. Crimes elsewhere, that is not on Chief Helton. His integrity being questioned is not fair to Chief Helton. He's served in the military and the Little Rock Police Department honorably for his entire career. Whether you agree with the advice of Little Rock City Attorney or not, and you're entitled to have your own opinion, he's following the advice as instructed by the Little Rock City Attorney's Office and asking him more questions about what happened that day when we know the answer in order to make light of the situation or question his integrity is not fair to this man right here. And I think he deserves better than he's been treated by this committee. And if we want to bring him back and Little Rock City Attorney, so be it. But the situation is what it is today. And I just want to stand up for this honorable public servant right here.
Senator Gilmore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to echo the comments made by my colleague, Senator Tucker. Please understand, Chief, we understand the untenable position you're in. I recognize that. We want answers. We owe it to the people of Arkansas to get answers. I hope you can appreciate the role we're in.
Definitely.
And so I don't think that anyone in this room is going to try to disparage or impugn your honor, your integrity in that matter. It is incredibly frustrating, as I know you are aware. You've stated as much. And so maybe we can have you back when you have more liberty to speak. And I think we should, as was already pointed out, have the mayor, have the city attorney, so that all of that is not put on you. So I appreciate what you do in law enforcement. That being said, is there anything that you can speak to related to this issue at all?
I think personally what I'll say is just some of the sentiments that were echoed by or made by Colonel Hager are things that I echo as well. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, that's fair. I do have another question that I would like to pose based on Colonel Hager's testimony or perhaps the major's testimony that said that that Little Rock PD was working perimeter. Can you affirm or deny that statement?
I think it's been very well established what our purpose was in this deal.
So you won't refute that statement?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, sir.
Senator Clark?
Yes.
You're recognized.
In deference to my colleague and colleagues, it is the elected Arkansas legislature, and no less than the Judiciary Committee, which has always been considered one of the most serious committees here, that if anybody has been disrespected, it is the people of Arkansas. And we did not rush into this. We waited. We've waited months. It's the end of September. People wondering if any, and so it's not like we rushed in the next day or the next month and started asking questions. And certainly the people of Arkansas expect us to ask questions. And not only do they expect us to ask questions, they expect us to get answers. And you get answers however you can get answers. So no one meant any disrespect toward this gentleman. He's got a job and he's chosen the route that he's going to go. The city attorney's chosen the route that they're going to go. And the Arkansas legislature not only has the right to show that they are unhappy with that, I think we have a duty to show that we're unhappy with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, I understand everything that's been said regarding the advice that you've received from counsel. So I want to ask something that is just very general and not specific to this case by itself. Does the Little Rock Police Department have a written policy related to the use of body cameras?
We do.
Would you be willing to go ahead and have someone in your office just provide that written policy to the committee staff so that they can share it with everyone here?
Yes, sir. I'll make sure it's sent over.
Thank you.
Representative Beatty, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, over here kind of hiding behind the pole. Appreciate you being here today. Appreciate the position that you're in and the fact that under advice of counsel, you sat through this committee and you've known the entire time what your statement was going to be and what the fallout from this committee was going to be for you. My question is, the city attorney, is he here with you today?
No,
to
sir.
support his statement and instructions to you?
No, sir.
And just for the record, can you give us the city attorney's name? Is it Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, sir. That's him, Tom Carpenter.
So Tom Carpenter couldn't come today to sit through this committee with you to follow the instructions that he gave you in answering and addressing this body.
Yeah, I don't know what was on his schedule today, sir. What he had.
Obviously,
scheduled.
it was not the respect afforded to this committee in this subject matter, nor a level of respect for the Little Rock Police Department that he should afford you, sir. So again, I want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate the job you have to do. And I'm sorry that you were put in the position not to be able to speak and answer questions that as you saw fit. So thank you, sir. But I want folks to know it was Tom Carpenter, and the folks that have issue should take the opportunity to express their displeasure with the city attorney. So thank you.
Senator Gilmore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not going to ask you any questions because I know we're not going to get those answers, and that's already been stated. So I recognize that. As my colleague here, Senator Clark, so eloquently stated, we have a role as a legislature to make sure that we are advocating for the people of Arkansas. And within that, we have to hold agencies accountable as it may come to it. Hopefully not. But we have that role, especially as it relates to the state, to make sure that we're operating within the bounds given to us by the law. So I'm not going to ask you any questions related to that. One thing I will ask, and perhaps this will need to go through the chair, but since the city attorney has advised you to not answer the questions, whether we agree or disagree, we understand. Is it possible for you to request the city attorney to offer a statement as to the role of the Little Rock Police Department with this operation in ATF?
I will make that request of him and see what he says.
Because I think it would be helpful for this committee just to hear from your agency and the city of Little Rock. If you're not at liberty to speak here today, then let's get something in writing from the attorney who gave you that advice.
Yes,
is that fair?
Yes, sir. That's fair. I'll make that request to.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Senator Gilmore. Any other question from committee? Mr. Held, I too want to thank you for your service, not only in the military, but in the police, and we appreciate you being here today. With that being said, no more questions. We're adjourned. Oh, hang on a second. We're open again. We have a motion. We have a motion. Senator Clark, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that authority be granted to the chair of the Senate Committee on Judiciary to exercise the subpoena power of the committee to issue subpoenas for persons, documents, and records related to the ATF raid of the home of Brian Malinowski on March 19, 2024.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any discussion?
I'm posting the contact info of our city attorney. Hold on a
To
second.
whom are we issuing subpoenas?
It gives the power to the chair
Okay.
to issue subpoenas.
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's what I was just trying to
All right.
clarify.
Any other discussion? Senator Tucker?
And so it's the chair's discretion who the subpoenas are directed to at that point?
It actually, by rules of the legislature.
There you go,
pro
folks.
tem and,
Give
Speaker
that
has
dude a call.
approve.
Okay.
In this case, since it's a Senate committee, it may just be the pro tem, but
Thomas
The
Carpenter.
pro tem approves the committee chair's discretion, or it's then the pro tem's discretion?
Once this committee issues subpoenas, the pro tem has to sign off on it.
Okay. And sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Committee chair will determine who a subpoena goes to, and then the pro tem will sign off on it before it goes.
Unless you want to amend the motion
No, I
to
just
bring it
want to
back
get
to the committee. But
yeah.
yes, as the motion is presented, the chair will have the freedom to decide what subpoenas need to be issued. I'm
Okay.
sure he will be glad to consult with us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any more discussion? Motion and second's been made. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. We are adjourned.